And I spotted something up there in the hills. I really want to check it out. It looks like an old bunker or something. Look at this.
Any bullets left over?
So here we were on the border of Russia and China. Can you explain exactly where we were?
So there's a town in Inner Mongolia, which is a province in China, called Genhe. Mm-hmm. And then there's one in Hulunbeir, which is on the Russian border, called Mohe.
And that's the northernmost point of China.
Of China, right? And there's a stretch in between there that really follows the border. I mean, we followed the Russian border for probably 1,000 miles.
Yeah.
And that stretch is kind of where you're going to see us today. And we found a lot of interesting stuff there.
Yeah, so, all the way along the Russian border, you would often get to parts where you could see into Russia. There'd be a fence, either a river or a fence or
Sometimes
something.
the fence was open.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Yeah. We actually saw gates in the fence or holes in the fences and people coming in and out, like on their little motorbikes. They've got
pretty porous border.
Yeah, very porous border. But there were certain areas where it was very strict and you could see military bases just across the way. You could see guard towers and that kind of thing.
Yeah, a lot.
I remember you left my spirit. With you high is all I'm feeling. Remember how we felt.
It's really hard to figure out who to trust these days when it comes to the news. We've got biased news outlets all over the place, all vying for your opinion. And that's why we love Ground News. It gives us a very grounded view of the news.
Ground News is the world's first news comparison platform. It's got over 50,000 sources, over 60,000 news articles, and what it does, it actually allows you to compare the news sources in real time. So you can get rid of those echo chambers, and you can be a more informed critical thinker when you consume your news. One of the things that we love about Ground News is the blind spot function, which actually shows you which side of the political spectrum avoided what topic. So for example, here we can see it was a big blind spot for the left wing when this article came out about PayPal saying that the policy to fine their customers was an error. A big blind spot for the right wing was this story about how 4 people were killed in a drug-related shooting in Fort Worth. It's really cool that you can actually compare who is avoiding what topics for what reason, where that funding is coming from, and it's just a great way to consume your news and be a more well-rounded person. Go to ground.news/ADVChina. You can try Ground News for free. Or you can subscribe to get access to all the features that you see here and support a small team of independent media outsiders wanting to make the news more transparent. Again, that's ground.news/ADVChina or click the link in the description below.
And now back to the show. Seamilk, we have just entered into Heilongjiang again.
For the deja vu, totally different scenery though. We're way in a different region of this massive, massive province.
Yeah, I really do like the birch trees, and riding through these forests has been quite interesting, except every time we stop, we're just attacked by gnats and flies and xiameng,
I was about to say, the diversity in the landscape has been staggering. It's absolutely beautiful everywhere we go, and everything looks completely different. However, one thing remains the same, are these damned xiameng, or the deer flies. They're everywhere. It's sucking me to death.
Yeah, it's awful. I mean, that's why I don't really want to take my helmet off at the moment, because, at least I can...
block them out.
Stop the bloody gnats and xiameng and all that stuff from getting in there. Anyway, we are almost at Mohe. Mohe is the northernmost town.
It's really bizarre to think that we have been on the road for almost 40 days now.
Now, in the news right now, you've probably been seeing this nonsense about China and Russia, and they're kind of cooperating, and
They are.
They are.
Yeah.
China's definitely backing Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and whether they say it out loud or not, they still are. They've been there as a stopgap, helped Russia when sanctions were imposed on Russia. They weren't allowed to use the Stripe format, the whole way to transfer currency. China stepped in and said, that's okay, you use UnionPay instead.
Yeah, and also China's been condemning Ukraine, saying that if they join NATO, then it's then game over.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? In support of Russia.
Yeah. By the way, you can see us here riding on the road all the way. This is the road that is pretty much along the border.
Right on the border of Russia. You could literally just look across the street almost, and you're basically in Russia.
Yeah. And this we rode for days and days, in this part of China. It's actually a very beautiful part of China. There's a lot of trees up there, which is not something you're used to seeing.
Yeah. This is like one of the only consistently forested areas where the trees are actually native species as well.
Yeah.
What happened was Chairman Mao got rid of all the trees because people had to power backyard furnaces. And this actually ties in. in those backyard furnaces, what they were doing was boiling down or melting down pots and pans or anything they could to hit steel quotas or iron quotas to match the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
And there was a deep hatred of Russia and the Soviet Union starting in the Mao days. And that's crazy because you'd think, hey, two communist countries, right?
I mean, China based its entire government
Yeah.
off of the Soviet model.
Right.
You know?
But China hated the Soviet
Yeah,
Union.
and they hated them out of envy. You
Yes.
can tell because everything that Mao Zedong tried to do was an emulation of the Soviet Union.
Correct.
He just wanted to be the same, if not better.
Now, the most important thing to bring up here is the really cool stuff we saw in the area. And along this entire area, when you follow the border of Russia and China, you'll find a lot of anomalies. And you might have seen in prior adventures that we had, but we'd run into Russian people that ended up on the wrong side of the border and ended up with their native language being Chinese.
Yeah, actually, there's a link to that video down below if
Yeah.
you want to go check it out.
Wild. We made some cookies with them and talked to them and stuff. Some random people just wander in the streets are like, yeah, my village is right over there, but the border got drawn in this really awkward space, and now these Russians ended up in China by accident.
Yeah.
In a lot of these areas, we mentioned the border's quite porous. A lot of these areas, it's heavily guarded. So some of these towns where these people don't even leave the towns, these are the heavily guarded areas.
Yeah.
There's guys up there with guns. And Moha, you can see it's super fortified on both the Russia and China side. It's almost like you get a sense of a lot of mistrust there.
Well, there is. Don't forget that China and Russia actually had a war. And it was crazy. Mao Zedong was fearful of retaliation from the Soviet Union because, their communication broke down. And, of course, what was happening at the time is, they weren't very happy about China getting nuclear weapons and so on. And Mao Zedong decided that, well, we're just going to treat the Soviet Union as an enemy. And he was so paranoid that he actually built like an underground tunnel system in Beijing called the Dixiacheng, which means
Crazy.
underground city. And it's huge. It's like this labyrinthine kind of tunnel network where people could get into the tunnels from shops and schools and things like that. And it had barracks down there. It had supplies down there. And this was in the event of a nuclear attack, because he was fearing a nuclear attack from the Soviets.
Yeah.
So, there is actually a lot of mistrust between China and the Soviet Union, believe it or not.
Yeah. To really fast forward to modern day times, you kind of only saw this partnership happen in our time span of living in China. And then you started to see towns like Mongolia, for example, which are right on the border and serve as like a trade barrier / buffer for China and Russia. And they modeled the town and city after Russia. So we started to see some decent cooperation happening in like the mid to late 2000s. And I noticed that. I think you noticed that as well. The apartment blocks, all the buildings and stuff, they look like Russia and European instead of looking like a Chinese town or even like an old Soviet town instead of emulating that. So really, it's a recent partnership and I'm not going to say that the mistrust is gone. It's just that there's a lot of benefits to be had on both sides because both countries are kind of being villainized by the rest of the world for their authoritarian approach.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, here's the thing. I'm going to bring us back in here. It's kind of weird. You can see us in the background. You can see us in the foreground. Yeah, but I'm going to bring us back in here. And this whole relationship between China and the Soviet Union, it's a fair weather friends situation. All right. And they greatly benefit from each other, especially in the face of Western sanctions and things like that. Right. But China is really playing its hand here. And it's backing Russia into a corner where Russia's fully dependent on China for many things, trade, finance, using their union pay system and all these other types of things. And I feel like it's going to end up very badly for Russia.
Yeah.
And the thing is, we know that for the longest time there was mistrust between the two. And this is kind of proof of it because as we were riding on these roads over here, we had to stop for gas. And remember, we stopped there and I spotted something up on the hill and I kept bugging you guys like, let's go and see it, right? And we actually went to go see it. Let's just show you the clip so you can see what we're talking about here. Just stopped to fill up some petrol. We're kind of in the middle of nowhere. We're on this one little road that leads pretty much to the northernmost part of China. And I spotted something up there in the hills. I really want to check it out. It looks like an old bunker or something. So how about we go take a look?
Let's go check it out.
My way is better. there's a plaque here, and what I can make out is, well, it's got a date here. It says 1966, and it says ammunition supply. It's probably an ammunition supply dump. 1966 would have been sort of Cold War era. That we are very close to Russia. It's apparently 108 square meters inside, which that's pretty big.
Think there's any bullets left over?
I want to take a look inside. It's really dark. Better watch your step.
Okay. After you.
All right. Look at this.
Any bullets left over?
Don't think so, but it's really weird how cool it is in here, eh?
I guess it makes sense. It's built into the side of the mountain, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. I love this old stuff, you know. This is it's really interesting.
But if you ask the PLA soldiers in 1966 and they're stocking this place, did you ever think there'd be a South African and American dude walking through here?
Yeah, they wouldn't answer favorably to that, would they? Yeah, unfortunately, I'm sure it's picked clean. We're not going to be finding any old bullets or anything. Tank shells or whatever they were.
Well, they never got to use it.
Yeah, I guess not.
No wars around that time.
This is a good little find. I'm really happy that we stopped at this petrol station, really.
Yeah, it's cool to find places where you can catch a little bit of history just by checking it out yourself, too.
So, for those of you who are interested, somewhere in the north of China there is an abandoned ammo dump. So if you're ever in this very far-flung region, somewhere between Inner Mongolia and Heilongjiang, you'll find an old abandoned ammo dump. Let's try and find our way out of this treacherous place. So, I mean, I thought that was pretty fascinating to come across that piece of history there, and it shows you that they had ammunition stored all along the border. This was just one of the many that we passed and the many structures. And, of course, they were ready for an invasion or, you know, to invade. Who knows what the deal was, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, the thing that makes me kind of sad is I'm glad that we got to explore the whole region. I'm glad we got to meet all the minority tribe people, like the reindeer herders we met up there.
Oh, yeah.
Really fascinating story about them. They actually are reindeer herders that have to deal with bears all the time that attack their reindeer, and then China outlawed guns.
Yeah, so they can't shoot the bears anymore.
Yeah, so if they're on the Russia side, they could,
Yeah.
but they got stuck basically on the China side, so their reindeer are just getting mauled by these bears.
I know, it's kind of a crazy situation.
They don't even give like a couple, 22s to people in the woods.
Well, China cannot afford to let any of its citizens own guns.
No.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was really fascinating to see those kind of people and even the Russians and stuff that were really hospitable to us. And it's just a shame that both countries had to go in the direction that they went in. There's just so much beauty and so many interesting uncovered pieces of society and pieces of culture that are all along these border regions in China. And the effort to homogenize. The effort to homogenize everyone and just make everyone the same, right? All the towns the same, all the minorities the same, all the different language groups the same. To make everyone the same is such a shame.
Yeah.
And the trajectory of China is just not correct.
No, I mean, remember, I keep making that joke, and I've said it before, but I keep telling people I could be in southern China, you could knock me out. I wake up in northern China and I think I'm in the same place.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're talking thousands of miles of distance between us.
Yeah.
And it looks the same. The signs on the shops are exactly the same. The buildings are the same. Everything is exactly the same, even though each area has its own distinct flavor and, you know, supposed culture and dialect and stuff. It gets wiped out, and so it just looks cookie cutter.
Yeah.
It's a shame, to be honest.
It's the different minority regions and the border regions that make China so special.
Yeah.
Because that is where the differences are. That's where you go find these anomalies and stuff, and they're just quickly being eradicated.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, all we can do is hope that this madness that we're seeing in the world right now when it comes to Russia invading Ukraine and China acting belligerent and threatening to invade Taiwan and, you know, being a bad actor in all these many different ways. We can just hope that this comes to an end very soon.
Yeah.
And sanity prevails, you know?
Yes, let's hope.
Anyway, we hope you enjoyed our little adventure into the border of Russia and China over there, showing you something that you probably would never be able to see, anywhere else, really. Yeah. And we can't wait to see you in the next video. So until then, you know the drill. As always, stay awesome.